everyone. We are back with our last part of the four-part series with Mary Shores. I'm Ashley. I have Emily here as well from Arbite. This is the final piece of the series, so make sure you watch part 1 through 3 as well. In this one, we're going to be talking about establishing credibility in the new normal. As many people know, business is changing rapidly in a lot of different industries, including the collection industry. So one element that we're going to look at today is the relationship with clients. So we're going to talk about how we can establish credibility in the new normal with clients in post-COVID world. So thank you, Mary, again for doing this with us. We are honored to have you on here. So we'll jump right in. If you can tell us what you think agencies will need to focus on to establish credibility in the new normal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. And it's such an important question because, I don't know what you guys have experienced, but I think that this has been COVID-19 is what is considered a black swan event because it has affected everyone all over the world, right? And so if you're alive today, it's likely that this pandemic is the biggest black swan event that we've experienced. Like I know it is for me. Like nothing has been more of a shakeup than this. And especially something that where a virus is affecting how every aspect of life, how do we educate our children? How do we seek out our medical care? How do we take vacations or not? How do we function in this world? And so there's three main topics or three main ideas that I've come up with of how we as agencies can establish credibility with our clients in the new normal. And the first one is to establish safety and security. This is so important to understand because, early on in the pandemic, many of our clients needed to shut off their collections. So a lot of them were hitting the pause button, and this made a lot of agencies vulnerable. And in fact, a lot of agencies had to lay a bunch of collectors off. If not, some cases they laid all of their collectors off, right? This was a scary moment. And I'm not aware of any other time that that's happened. So why did the clients pause collections? Well, it was because they didn't want any backlash. They didn't want to be viewed in a negative way if they were allowing collections to happen. Okay, so I can completely understand the reason for it. And so the antidote is, how are you going to keep your clients safe from any negative backlash and, keep them secure from that in the long term? So if I were hiring like an IT company to handle my network security, then we do that because we want to have safety and security now and into the future, whether that's through establishing firewalls or, email encryption or whatever all the options are. So the first thing is establishing safety and security. The second thing is really all about, I think that this here, this Black Swan event has created a lot of opportunity, okay, for a lot of people, if you're willing to see it that way. And what you want to do is also realize that with opportunity comes a lot of competition. So we want to be able to manage a highly competitive market with our unique strategies, specifically in the areas of the consumer experience. And so what I mean by that, if you're an agency owner or if you're in marketing at an agency or sales, it's like sharing your internal collection strategies and philosophies with your clients in a much more transparent way, I think is going to become the new normal. Like, I think that clients are going to want to understand what training is being done in your agency. I think they're going to want to become more involved. And because of that, we want to really be very proud of our own internal strategies, because what we will do is we will magnetize like-minded clients to us. Okay, so if I'm in healthcare collections and I'm all about like kind and compassionate collections, then the types of clients who have that as a need will naturally magnetize to me, right? So the last thing is establishing clear ROIs. We want to make, that's always been the case, but I think that a little bit of the twist is how is your particular strategy going to be the return on the investment for the clients? So, as we've had to reshape some of our strategies. For example, a lot of court systems got shut down for a very long time. And so if you're an agency that relies heavily on litigation, what are your alternate strategies that are going to create a better ROI that you can then share with your clients to establish that credibility? And I want to make one final point about this, which is, even if you have had a long-standing relationship with the client, it is vital to understand that that long-standing relationship might not be worth much right now, because the fear of what could happen to them if something bad were to come out in the media, with cancel culture and all, that fear is going to be stronger than the relationship that you currently have. I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I loved your point about transparency too. I think that's been really key for us as a company as well. Just being really honest about what our struggles are and what we're going through. It's really attracted people, and you might think the opposite, like being brutally honest about your company might deter people, but in fact, we found it has the complete opposite effect. So
Hmm.
I love
Yeah,
that
with
point.
everything going on, I think it's just you need to make changes like that. So being transparent with your clients and telling them, because we're in such a different world now that personal lives are now altered by everything, not just work. So they have to understand that, and that has to be said to them as well.
Yeah. So before we dig more into this, just to kind of bring everything together here, as this is the final part of the series, can you just give insight into how understanding consumer experience, training, and empathy, how it all ties together to create better interactions between clients and agencies?
Yes, absolutely. So we've touched upon some of this in the previous videos in the series. And I think that for decades, I've always heard the phrase in the industry, this is kind of like more of an inside thing, okay? So when you get hired as a collector, if you're a collector watching this video, I wouldn't be surprised if someone has said to you, or maybe you're a manager and you've said this to a collector, but one thing is we have the message, we're an extension of our client's office. So have you guys heard that phrase? So the collection agency wants to act as an extension of their client's office. And yet we'll also say to collectors, we're not customer service. And so that's a mixed message. Okay. It's true that we're not customer service, but how do we become an extension of our client's office without understanding the consumer experience? And so, dialing it back to the first video where we talked a lot about consumer experience, the way to really bring this in is with training. And we have to be careful about the mixed messages that we're giving our agents right from day one. If they hear those mixed messages, if you put yourself in the shoes of a collector, I mean, how confusing would that be? And, in addition to this, we also see that when you train this way, you're going to get such a reduction of complaints because we have increased that awareness. It doesn't have to be about customer service. It can be about professionalism, compassion, empathy, and how we're responding to the consumer. And what we're seeing is that that's actually going to strengthen the relationship with the client. So the more you're treating the consumers better, this again helps you establish credibility with your clients because they're getting a reduced amount of complaints. And funny story about this, because one of the things I was going to say was like, well, I've never had a client call me and complain about not getting complaints. But that's actually not true, because one time 10 years ago, this client, it was a radiology client, they literally called me in for a meeting, and the place was like an hour away. And their big concern was, Ms. Shores, we don't get any complaints about your agency, so we don't believe you're actually doing the work we hired you to do.
Wow.
Like, that's actually a true story. Okay. And then he goes, but you must be doing something because we get checks from you and we get better checks from you than we do from the other agency. So, but isn't that kind of like, again, with the mixed messages, like, do we believe that high complaints and more aggression equals higher recovery. And I think that if we're being really honest, people did believe that in the past, but now in the new normal, I think what we need to go back to understanding is that people remember the way you made them feel. And that connection is currency. We talked about that a lot in video 3. Connection is currency. And so it's your ability to create that connection that is going to increase the recoveries while you decrease the complaints, even if that one client of mine didn't understand that.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't know. How did you take that? Were you like, this is a good thing? Or were you like, I can't believe someone is asking me or saying I'm not actually doing the work?
So I think that, I'd have to go back to my 10 years ago self. And I'm one thing my COO told me yesterday, he's like, you're pretty unflappable. People can throw things at you, and you seem to have a good way of responding to him. So I probably explained to him all the neuroscience behind my system and bored him to death with tears until he just didn't worry about it anymore. At the end of the day, he was happy because he was getting checks. I think
Right.
he was just a little bit bewildered, like, were we just getting lucky and collecting this money? But I also feel like I felt him. Like, do you know what I mean by that? Like, I
Mhm.
felt him, and I didn't like that feeling that my client expected me to be what the industry stigma is all about in the first place. And I'll be honest, like, that was a little bit of a disconnect for me. Like, look, dude, I'm not your Guido. I think I used to make this joke a lot about Book 'em Dano. Oh, did you want me to like Book 'em Dano?
I feel like I've heard you say that before too. Okay, so you did kind of touch on like credibility and reputation in this last question, but just a little bit deeper. How can leadership teams empower their collectors with the mindset that every conversation they have has an effect on their credibility and reputation, and encourage collectors to take ownership of their role?
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen in this past 1 year now is a lot of agencies embracing empathy. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. And even going as far as, a conversation that I had with John Bedard, we even looked at like, what if people use empathy for bad? Like, what are the drawbacks of empathy? And it's been a really interesting journey. So I think that one thing is like, leadership needs to be consistent, and it's empathy is not something you can just say, be empathetic. Okay. You can say that. The collectors will trip themselves up trying to be empathetic, and they'll end up in the friend zone. And I talk often like, the friend zone is not where you want to be on a collection call. You want to be in the connection zone, but the friend zone really brings out a lot of passive behaviors. So we need to train specifically on how do we provide the empathy. We need to say when it needs to happen and what are the actual words that display empathy. And again, that's going to go right back to being heard and understood. I think the next part of this is like, in the new normal, empathy isn't going to be a nice to have. It is going to be a must do. Okay. Because our culture is forever changed from the pandemic. We are not going back to the way it was before. And so empathy is going to become the standard. Right. And so you can get to that new standard kicking and screaming the entire way. Or we can start to understand that it's really about that training and starting from day one to get the collectors up to speed with how to do this. And again, it's those mixed messages. So the buy-in has to come from the leadership down, because any kind of lack of buy-in, then the collectors are going to feel those mixed messages. And finally, if you want collectors to take ownership of their role, then you need to define what those expectations are and what the role is, and then offer how to accomplish those expectations, and then go right in with these micro rewards. So micro rewards, like in online learning, we talk a lot about gamification, and I talk a lot about sharing the wins, because you want to celebrate those little micro successes in order to encourage taking ownership in that role.
Awesome. So everything up until this point, we've been talking about what's going on inside your agency. And so now we kind of want to switch gears. So can you talk about how this entire framework can lead to more credibility to the industry, which, like you said, will actually translate to revenue and currency, which is, of course, part of the bottom line.
Yeah, so I love this question, and I think it's, a perfect way to start to wrap up the series. I think that one of the reasons that the industry is stigmatized in the first place is because we have trackable and measurable complaint systems, and also, lawsuits. We have one of the highest litigated industries. We're also one, I think Joanne Needleman just mentioned to me the other day, we are the highest regulated industry. Like, think about that. There's more regulations on us than a surgeon. Like, that's that's kind
I
of a
have
big
I
deal.
have no words. I just don't.
The reason there are more regulations on us is because of the enormous amount of complaints, and the government has to deal with that. Like, they can't just pretend that that happens. And on the other hand, like, I think we have to be realistic, because the thing that we know, if complaints and lawsuits are the heart of the issue, the thing that we know inside the industry that other people outside the industry may not know is that some people complain because they are trying to save money. So we know in our culture now that the squeaky wheel, what is it? The squeaky wheel gets the oil or gets the grease or something. But get up on my cliches today,
Something like
Mary.
that.
Something like that. That really, in cancel culture, if you make enough of a stink, you might just get that agency to come to cancel your bill. And then you might have just saved yourself like $50 or $5,000, right? So I think we don't want to ignore that, because a lot of these complaints really are false complaints and people just trying to like profit from complaining. Okay. So for example, this is another true story. So this just happened recently. Like, our office, we don't really have an issue with complaints. And so when we do get one, we take it very seriously. So we got a CFPB response that we needed to write. And basically the complaint was that we didn't return her call. Now, I just want you to think about that for a second. She complained to the government because we didn't return her call. All right? Like, let that sink in. We didn't return her call. That's really awful that we didn't return her call. Like, I admit that if you are supposed to call someone back, you should call them back when you say you're going to call them back. And on the other hand, look, this is COVID, and, my employees are not always at work. If they have even a sniffle, they have to stay home that day, right? Because we're not having, you got a headache, don't come to work with your COVID, I'm just kidding. So here's the point, that I know it's frustrating to have someone not return your call, but does that really mean you shouldn't have to pay your $900 bill?
No.
So
No. The answer is no.
the answer is no, right? Okay, so even though a lot of these complaints are frivolous, let's just remember that the majority of them are real. Okay, so we don't want to discount the real complaints because some of them are silly. And, when we establish a framework that is going to raise the standards of the entire industry, this is going to help agencies in the area of customer experience, which is going to increase productivity and make a significant impact on the number of incoming complaints. So that little by little, okay, this is not like a lightning rod transformation. Little by little, we can establish credibility in the entire industry just by doing the good work we've been hired to do and adding that component of compassion and empathy and transparency, and also just being okay that some people are never going to pay no matter what we do. And that's okay, because we don't live in a culture where it's a crime to not pay a debt.
Yeah. That's awesome. Everything you said is amazing, and I hope everyone watching gets the most out of this, and I think they will. So for the people watching, if they have questions or anything like that, please let them know where they can reach you, because you are an amazing speaker. What you do is amazing, not only with your agency, but your training. So it's very beneficial and helpful for everyone watching.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Well, I have a website. It's maryshores.com. That's Shores. And I'd love you to visit. I've got a weekly blog on there. My favorite social media is LinkedIn. It's just my favorite. I mean, it's probably actually YouTube, but beyond YouTube, uh, beyond YouTube, it's LinkedIn. So if you would find me on LinkedIn under the name Mary Shores, I would love to connect with you. You know, if you send me a message, where I'm always going to respond to that as quickly as possible. And I just want to hear from you. Like, I want to hear, if you're a collector, what are you struggling with? If you're an agency owner, what are you struggling with? And like, let's open up and have this conversation as a greater collection community about how we can, create a survival guide to get us through this next year or two. And as we establish the new normal, some people say it's already here. I say we haven't exactly figured it out yet.
Yeah, it's definitely still new, but it's definitely a weird and different time. So helping each other and getting people to reach out to you or whatever the case may be, I think is very helpful for our industry, especially right now when people are struggling in the industry. So that's great. Thank you again so much. Part four of the four-part series is now done. So everyone, make sure you go watch all the parts. And thank you again so much. We appreciate it.